Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Steve Woods. He is the CTO at Nudge Software. Steve, how are you doing today?
It's great to be here, James. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
I'm really excited to chat with you, Steve. We're going to be talking about why help signals are more effective sales triggers than buying signals. But before we dive into that, I'd love for you to explain to our listeners what Nudge is all about and what your team are up to up there.
Sure thing. Would be glad to. So very simply, Nudge is a platform that helps sales professionals discover, maintain, and build the relationships that matter to them in the sales process. So understand the organization, understand how it's made up, understand where your team has the right relationships and needs the right relationships, and then give you some guidance and assistance in starting and developing those relationships in order to generate more revenue and sell better.
So, Steve, I want to kind of dive into this. This is a really intriguing topic to me, this idea of help signals and buying signals. So to tee us up, I'll just have you explain what is the difference between a help signal and a buying signal? Sure.
It's a great question. So the crux of it really comes down to whether that signal tells me that somebody is going to write a check right away. And help signals are really people that are looking for assistance. They might be trying to understand a space. They might be creating a plan, doing a business case, evaluating options. They're early on in their process. They're looking for help. They're very much not looking to buy now, as it were. And I think the opposite of buying signal really is an indicator of somebody who is late stage in the process. They've established all of the necessary preconditions and they're ready to write a check. And I think they're very different in terms of the psychology and the history that they indicate that individual has gone through.
Got it. Okay. So kind of having established kind of the difference there, as we were talking about this offline, Steve, you mentioned that buying signals often come way too late, particularly when a salesperson needs to be involved, more heavily involved in the sales process. Can you explain what that looks like? What you mean by that?
Sure. I think the core of understanding that really in today's era of driving revenue in general, and this affects all sides of the funnel from marketing through to sales, is the understanding that buyers can get the facts and figures that they need. They can get the information that they need without any human involvement, human assistance. So they're not needing sales to be involved in order to get the information that they require. So if your marketing efforts are identifying leads at a point where there's a very late stage, quote unquote, buying signal, and at that point you're trying to toss that signal over to sales and say, here, go have at it. There's a buying signal. This organization is ready to purchase. If you look at it through the eyes of the buyer, there's very few conditions where that actually is going to work in your favor. Chances are, if they've gone that late in a process, they've already acquired any of the early stage information that they need. If you're that late in the process and you're really just going into pitch mode as a salesperson, pitch mode doesn't establish trust. Pitch mode does not help you build that sort of foundation to a relationship. So if you're that late in the process that you introduce the human element and you try and build that relationship, you're building it on a very shaky foundation. It's very short term in terms of time, and it's very transactional in terms of its intent, neither of which really speak volumes in terms of the trust that you're able to develop. Far better to identify the opportunities early, to build the relationship, to have time, and not to be under the pressure of moving right into pitch mode, which lets you just be helpful. And it's that ability to help without the immediate transactional nature that starts to build that foundation of trust that will then let you shift and guide the buying process as you move forward.
So Steve, as you know, we've got a lot of marketers listening to this show. So how does the role of marketing kind of come alongside and help create these relationships, essentially this like relational air cover, if you will, that allows the potential buyer to have that relationship and that trust with the brand long before they're ready to make a decision?
I think you've got a great way of putting it. Marketing is shifting into that role of relational air cover, where you're not trying to push a deal all the way through to the point where sales just needs to take the transaction and process the order. You're trying to establish a messaging framework. You're trying to establish a value proposition. You're trying to queue up some pain points that someone might need help with. Even if they're so early stage, they don't necessarily know that they have the pain that requires a solution. And you're trying to open up opportunities where they would be open to being assisted with that. Doesn't necessarily mean that they want the demo, the PowerPoint, and the sales pitch. It means they're open to understanding a little bit more about how to solve that tactical problem, how to think about it, who else in the space has done interesting things around it. They're open to learning. They're open to being assisted. They're not necessarily yet open to being sold to because they haven't established enough of a pain to know that they need to buy something. So marketing's role really shifts to surfacing those pain points and identifying those moments where someone might need help. And sales role really shifts towards queuing off of that and using that to develop relationships over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the deal cycles that need a marketing and sales coordinated effort, they're the deal cycles that are non-transactional. They're the deal cycles that are not easy. They're the deal cycles where you have a need for a challenger sale or a deep web of relationships to be developed. Those are the only ones that are remaining that have that heavy human involvement in them. Because everything else, if you're just trying to buy a very understandable commoditized solution, you don't need human involvement. You just go purchase that online and are done with it.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. One way that we've tried to do that, and we've really built our entire business around it, is this idea of, really leaning into the fact that relationships and trust are so important. And so the way we look at podcasting as a whole is just fundamentally different than how most people look at podcasting, where most people are looking at it from, we're trying to get a bunch of listeners. And that comes, that comes as you've put out more and more content, and that content is genuinely helpful to a specified group of people. But what we found, the immediate benefit in it, is the guests that we have on the show, being potential clients for us or, referral partners for us. And so in having that kind of long view and using the podcast as a way to build a relationship first with by having them be a guest, they're much more likely to engage with you if you say, hey, I want to have you as a guest on my show, versus, hey, I want to try to sell you my thing. But then it allows you to nurture that relationship over the long term, because you've got a basis for building that relationship in the first place, which is giving them value by giving them exposure to your audience. But another thing that I'm thinking about as you said that, Steve, is just around kind of the the opt-in bribes or the assets that marketing can develop that are maybe that touch on those help signals as opposed to buying signals. Are there any particular assets or things that you've seen your customers come up with that get someone to give them an email address or raise their hand in some way to signify a help signal versus a buying signal?
Yeah, I think one of the general trends that we're seeing throughout the market is, as this sort of dynamic of buyers evolves, is actually the point of purchase going from being this big binary thing to a spectrum over time. And I think that opens up, to your question, a much broader set of these help signals than you would have had historically, where, if you look at the purchase of specifically, say, software, back 15, 20 years ago, heavy upfront consultation, $1 million purchase that was purchased for an entire enterprise for 5 years at a time, that style of doing business doesn't happen anymore. You engage in smaller amounts. You engage with individuals, you engage with departments. The departments themselves have successes, they have failures, they have challenges, they have opportunities. That leads to internal referral, that leads to a ton of help signals that help build this trust. So I think looking at it purely through the lens of what assets can you create might even blind you a little bit to the evolution of the picture, which is the buyer's journey is not just a marketing and sales journey anymore. It's an experiential journey where the thing that you offer is part of that, and you're trying to make it kind of ramp from a small part of their world to a larger part of the world. So I think marketing getting involved in the full spectrum of buyer behavior rather than assuming that there's this kind of binary big bucket endpoint where the person goes from prospect to customer and is never seen again, I think opens up a whole new world of opportunities to discover those help signals as that buyer goes through a much lengthier and much more robust journey as an individual.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Steve, we're coming down to the end of our time, but I want to close this out by talking about this idea that you mentioned offline of, the way we look for help signals is drastically different than the way we look for buying signals. And so can you walk us through fundamentally what are the differences there? What are some ways, some tangible kind of next steps we can take to be more proactive in looking for help signals as opposed to buying signals?
Yeah, I think much of it is really coming back to the easy to describe but difficult to put into practice discipline of being a great marketer, which is putting yourselves in the mind and the shoes of the buyer, and understanding from a persona perspective, from a use case perspective, where are they and what are they going to be thinking at that moment in time. And if you map that out against the journey from someone never having heard of you to discovering the basics of your value proposition, to engaging in a very light way, to bringing more, whether it's a team, whether it's more purchase, whatever that more is, bringing more of your solution into their organization. At each step there are internal dynamics, there are conceptual dynamics, there are proof points that you're going to need to prove to yourselves and others that you're doing the right thing. And understanding that journey from the mind and the shoes of that buyer, if you are honest about it, will spit out a lot of these moments where, hey, this is challenging. This is challenging for a reason that has to do with our solution. This is challenging for a reason that has to do with internal politics that people are going to be seeing. This is challenging because you're going to be going through this, low period in the process here. There's all of these moments in that journey that are challenging, and if you can put yourself in that buyer's shoes, you can discover where they're going to need help and therefore what they're going to be open to, even if that thing doesn't have a price tag. The more it doesn't have a price tag, the more you have an opportunity to develop a true relationship and true trust as that buyer goes through the tougher periods on that journey.
Got it. Love it. And so Steve, obviously Nudge helps you kind of take the burden of the research involved in doing what you just explained, and it really puts it kind of on the shoulders of artificial intelligence. Can you talk to us a little bit, particularly with you being the CTO, without getting too technical, talking about kind of how Nudge kind of comes along and does this for you?
Sure. Yeah. We don't do the entirety of it for you. The piece that we help with really is the visibility into that network of relationships, because I've used sort of the individual case in this conversation, but in most cases, this is a team effort. This is someone on your services team builds a relationship, someone on your sales team builds a relationship, someone on your marketing team builds a relationship, your exec team has relationships there with, on the other side of the fence, various folks at the buyer's organization. And it's through that team building of a web of relationships that you build the institutional trust that will convince and motivate that organization to continue to move forward with you. So Nudge is able to take this concept of relationships that is completely amorphous in today's world and really visualize it, show you how well are you doing, where are you doing well, where do you have those relationships, where are those relationships dying off, who's holding those relationships, who do you need to get access to in order to build out the trusted buying organization that is going to be required to get a deal done or to get a deal to grow. And just by making that move from relationships being invisible to relationships being visible, it gives you a map of what you need to focus on and what you need to work on in order to broaden and to get access to the deals, and really makes the way forward if you're truly developing a trust and relationship based sales process that is quality, not quantity based. It gives you the map forward and it gives you the visibility that you need to do that.
I love it. Steve, this has been fantastic. If there's somebody that wants to connect with you, maybe dig deeper on this topic, how can they connect with you? And then how can they learn more about Nudge?
Sure thing. So I'm always available. steve.woods@nudge.ai is my email address. Steve Woods on Twitter. Feel free to reach out on any of those. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, too. And Nudge.ai is our website. There's all the resources there you'd hope for, and there's an individual version of the product that is free to use for people that care about their own individual network, which gives you a flavor of it. So feel free to choose from any of those avenues and learn more as much as you'd like.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time today. This has been super helpful, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, James. Great chatting with you.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you or someone you know would be an incredible guest for the B2B Growth Show, email me at jonathan@sweetfishmedia.com. Let us know. We love connecting with B2B executives, and we love sharing their wisdom and perspective with our audience.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.